Hello, my friends. I'm back from traveling around for nearly 4 days, and one of the things I did while I was gone was check out the new Joker film. There'll be some spoilers in here, so feel free to not watch this video if you intend to go see the movie yourself. And I'll just say you should go see it. Alright? The spoilers begin. Even though the movie is all about the Joker, in my opinion, the meta-narrative revolves around Thomas Wayne, the father of the kid that will eventually become Batman. The film's set in the 80s, and Bruce Wayne is still a child. There's no Batman, and Gotham's rogues gallery doesn't exist yet. One of the universal truths of the Batman mythos is that the deaths of Thomas and Martha Wayne set into motion a series of events that influenced Bruce into becoming Batman as an adult years later. The stories are almost always told from Batman's point of view, or at least a point of view sympathetic to him, so we only really get to see Thomas Wayne in a positive light, as generally a good father whose untimely death haunts his son. But in Joker, we get to see it from the other side. It's left somewhat ambiguous what kind of a man Thomas Wayne is this time around. The mother of Arthur Fleck, Phoenix's Joker character, is extremely manipulative and abusive towards him. There's evidence that he's the illegitimate son of Thomas Wayne, but there's also evidence that his mother is simply making it up to try and get some of that Wayne family money. It smacks of Michael Jackson's own early Me Too moment, where a delusional fan accused him of fathering her child and abandoning them, an experience that eventually inspired the song Billie Jean. It's not just that, though. Antifa-style riots break out across Gotham, inspired by the Joker's activities, where the people assault the cops and call the rich fascists and so on. It's a very eat-the-rich kind of mentality on display here. Wayne Enterprise suits kick the shit out of the downtrodden for fun, and it's implied that the city's rich, the Wayne family included, just do not care about the rampant poverty in the city. So, when random rioters gun down Thomas and Martha Wayne, it's not really presented as a tragic moment in a young boy's life, although it obviously is, but rather the logical consequence of letting resentment fester in a large underclass of disenfranchised people. A recurring message in the film regarding the 1% is, they deserved it. On the surface, this portrayal of the Wayne family makes Joker feel like a piece of revolutionary left propaganda, and you'd be excused if you thought this was the case based on my description alone. But as it turns out, all the usual suspects, the revolutionary communists, the Antifa supporters, the SJWs, the journalists, none of them are supporting this film. They all hate it. They're either doing their best to talk about how awful they think it is, or scaremongering constantly about how Joker is going to inspire more incels to commit more shootings. And that's really the linchpin in this conversation, the incels. Joker is labeled as a film sympathetic to incels, or more specifically, sympathetic to shooters, because it shows how the shooters are created. It's very easy for the radical left to simply believe that toxic masculinity, and only toxic masculinity, is the problem. That incels are stamped with the word problematic on their forehead the day they are born. That it's something inherent in their blood, their DNA, their makeup. That each and every single one of them is incapable of change, and therefore simply must be suppressed with all the force we can muster. This attitude can be properly summed up by Emma Gonzalez, a survivor of the Stoneman Douglas school shooting.
Those talking about how we should have not ostracized him? You didn't know this kid!
It's obvious she feels the ostracization of the shooter that attacked her school was justified by his behavior. And I don't know, maybe it was. But how much of his behavior was something innate to him? And how much of it was the logical end result of a negative feedback loop reinforced by Emma and others? I'm not saying that the shooter isn't responsible for his actions, he obviously is. But think back to my video, The Tyranny of Guilt, where I put forward the idea that acceptable collective guilt doesn't mean guilt along racial or gender lines or whatever, but rather an extreme form of individual guilt where you wonder what kind of dumb decisions you made that might have set another person on the wrong path. Yeah, this is one of those times. In my opinion, this is also the central thesis of Joker. The eponymous character is already living in poverty. He gets beat up by people around him for fun. He's abused by his mother. He loses access to his medication because social programs are cut. And he inadvertently starts a revolution where thousands of other underclass people begin to worship him, when it really seems like, deep down, the only thing he wants is for somebody else to actually care about him. He is, of course, responsible for everything he does. But if you don't think that some responsibility is also on the shoulders of those around him who mistreat him, then you've probably got an ideology that you want to push. The radical left views incels as an unknowable quantity. We cannot hope to understand their thought processes, we can only destroy them. There are incels in your company, what are you going to do about it? If they're forced to admit that the incels are not born, but created, yes, for the third time, they're responsible for their own actions, and yes, they also reinforce their own negative feedback loops in their echo chambers on Reddit and elsewhere, but also yes, society treats lower class men like absolute shit. I really wanted to avoid using the word society in this video, but it had to come up eventually. If all of those yeses are true, then the social justice upper class would actually be somewhat culpable for the problem. That's the point of Joker, and it's why the SJWs hate it. Because let's be real here. At this point, the institution is left-wing. The SJWs are in charge of a lot of stuff. They are, to some degree, the 1%. We've got conservative governments right now, sure, but a lot of corporations, especially big tech, are swinging more and more to the left. And these people are completely fine with Antifa's revolutionary eat-the-rich mentality, because they still believe that they're not the establishment. Joker is a film that shows them where that mentality leads now that they are the establishment, and their political opponents have become the downtrodden, and they don't like it. At this point, the Antifa slogan might as well be, eat the rich until we become the rich, then eat the poor. Joker is a tale of a straight white man on the lowest rung of the ladder, driven partially by his environment to commit heinous acts. When Things Fall Apart did this story for black people, the left loved it. When countless movies and TV shows have depicted women brutalized by men and eventually striking out, the left also loved it. But show the male underclass undertaking the same journey? Now it's problematic, both in-universe and for what they fear it'll inspire in the real world. I don't want to make a blanket statement. Some people really are just born so predisposed to violence and exploitation that there's just no helping them. And to be honest, I don't know what to do about those people. But I would hazard a guess that that's not most shooters. When you pathologize an entire class of people, regardless of their race or gender or anything else, it is the height of arrogance to be stunned when they inevitably lash out. For the long time, that was the left's biggest contribution to our culture. Proletariat revolution, smashing the patriarchy, eradicating racism. They're all different variations of an abused underclass of people, lashing out against their oppressors. But when it comes to the topic of disenfranchised men, that logic goes right out the window. The only thing the radical left seems to want to do is continue the oppression. And they either don't know or don't care that it's their actions creating the very problem they claim to want to solve. I'm just ranting now because this video is half scripted and half my impressions of the movie, if you can't tell. It's a good movie. But I don't think it's a call to action for incels, nor does it show the Joker in a positive light. It's a story about how victims become abusers. It's a story about how ostracizing people doesn't make them vanish, it makes them radicalize. And if you do that to enough people, they will eventually come back with a vengeance. This is a story the left intuitively understands, because they tell it every time they speak. This time around, they just don't like who it's about.